The Middle East was a battlefield for most of the 20th century. But one of the hardest fought wars of all was in 1973, when Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on Israel on the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. For 3 weeks, the battle swung violently from side to side. It brought each within sight of victory and defeat. And it brought the superpowers, America and the Soviet Union, close to a nuclear showdown.
The Israelis were in no doubt they were fighting for their country's very survival. For the soldiers of Syria and Egypt, it was a battle for Arab territory and Arab pride.
In this program, I'll be revealing how Arab and Israeli commanders astonished each other with the boldness of their strategy.
And I'll be finding out how both sides used the latest weaponry with shattering results.
No 20th century conflict has been as lasting and bitter as the struggle between Israel and its Arab neighbors. This is the story of the biggest battle between them. It's still such a sensitive subject in Egypt that they wouldn't let us film there. This is the story of the October War of 1973.
This concrete security barrier here runs through Jerusalem and hundreds of miles to the north and the south. On this side live predominantly Muslim Palestinian Arabs. On this side, the largely Jewish population of Israel. The 8-meter-high barrier, which the Israelis started building in 2002, is the most powerful symbol of the hostility between Jews and Arabs, which still remains after nearly a century of conflict. The Israelis say that they built this barrier to keep out Palestinian terrorists. The Palestinians say it's just Israel's way of grabbing more of their land. And that's what this conflict has always been about: land. Land known at the beginning of the 20th century as Palestine.
Back in 1917, the British controlled Palestine, and they promised the Jews a homeland here. The problem was, there were more than 10 times as many Arabs as Jews already living in Palestine. And as hundreds of thousands more Jews poured into the country, open fighting broke out between them. By 1947, things were so bad, the United Nations stepped in with a plan. This is how Palestine looked then. Lying on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, it was bordered by Lebanon, Syria, Transjordan, and Egypt. The United Nations suggested partition. The Palestinians would keep land here, here, and here, and the Jews would have the rest. Jerusalem would be an open city shared by everyone. The Jews accepted the plan, and in 1948 they declared their independence as the State of Israel. But the Palestinians and the neighboring Arab countries rejected partition. War followed, and the borders changed once more. The Israelis took over Arab lands here in the north and along the Egyptian border, ending up with most of Palestine and most of the key city of Jerusalem. Tens of thousands of Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes. These refugees headed to neighboring Arab countries, creating a refugee crisis that lasts to this day.
One night everyone was awakened to the sound of people. Go, go, the Jews are coming. I can still recall the voice and the ensuing chaos. Within a short period of time, the entire village was marching out, carrying their essentials, bedding on a mule, some clothing, some food.
The Arabs refused to recognize this new state of Israel, and their resentment at the loss of Palestinian homes and land grew. For their part, the Israelis felt vulnerable, surrounded on all sides by hostile Arab enemies. Over the next 20 years, there was regular fighting along the borders.
In 1967, things finally came to a head. On the morning of June the 5th, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt. It was followed hours later by attacks on Egypt's allies, Syria and Jordan. It would become known as the Six-Day War.
Almost 200 pilots of the Israeli Air Force took part in an incredibly ambitious airstrike. Their mission was to wipe out the Egyptian Air Force, the largest in the Arab world. In just under 2 hours, Israeli bombs destroyed almost the entire Egyptian Air Force before it had even got off the ground. Next, Israel launched strikes on the air forces of Jordan and Syria. By the end of the day, Israeli pilots had won total control of the skies.
Not very far away, there were some military bases, and they had been attacked early in the morning. There was nothing announced, and we didn't know what was going on. Defeat was unfolding right there.
Israeli ground troops stormed into Syria, Jordan and Egypt. At the same time, other Israeli troops made a bid to capture Arab-held Jerusalem. On June the 7th, just 2 days into the war, Israeli paratroopers charged through this gate into the old city. As they pushed through these narrow streets, they came under fire from Jordanian snipers who'd taken up position in the upper stories of the buildings on either side. The Israelis pushed on. It took them a few hours to clear out these last pockets of resistance, but by early afternoon, the whole of Jerusalem was in Israeli hands.
I took out the Israeli flag, which I carried with me the whole time, and waved it. I hung the flag on the fence. My commander, who was the toughest among us, was standing next to me. He burst into tears underneath his steel helmet. Another friend was weeping, a chain of bullets wrapped around his neck.
In the days that followed, Israeli troops drove back the soldiers of Jordan, Syria and Egypt. In 6 days, the Israelis had won the war. The defeated nations counted the cost.